my shoes and out the door. 5, I'm alive. 6, 7, 8, feeling.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to this episode of Beyond Your Wildest Genes podcast. Today, I am thrilled to introduce Dr. Don McDonald to everyone. Dr. Don has spent 17 years in the health and wellness industry as a chiropractor in Edmonton, Alberta, Canada. It was from his position around the adjusting table that he noticed a common frustration developing into a major stressor in the lives of many of his patients. He identified this as the underdog, and they couldn't seem to break out of it. It was a pattern he'd seen in his own life as well. It stopped people from living their best lives and stripped them of true happiness. So Dr. Don has sent himself on a mission to find out how to break the underdog curse and move into authentic, lasting success. And we're happy to share that with you today. Dr. Don is a life coach and motivational speaker who dedicates his time to empowering people with this new inspiring information on success, health, and his first love, neurology. He and his wife, Brandy, run a thriving chiropractic clinic and chiropractic seminar series. They're both busy conference speakers and loving parents to a rescue pit bull named Lux. Don and Brandy have been friends and colleagues of ours for a number of years, and I'm really thrilled to have you on the program today, Dr. Don.
Hi, Wanda. How are you?
Good, thank you.
I'm excited.
I am too. This is going to be so much fun.
Yes.
So our first step is to give our listeners, we have just about 200,000 people as I'm recording this, probably over that by the time it airs in about 95 countries. So let's let people get to know you. I know you a little bit as a person, and I know how wonderful you are, but let's share a little bit with our listeners who you are, how you came to write this book, and why you think it's important.
Well, I grew up in a little mountain town called Grand Cache. It's a small mining town up in the mountains, and it was kind of secluded from the rest of the world. So I kind of, even going to the big city, Edmonton, was kind of like the big, kind of excitement for me. So it was easy for me to start off as an underdog in my life because you're kind of out away growing up in the mountains. But my first love was basketball. That was kind of one of my ways to get out of the small little town. I played basketball in the city. And through basketball, I started developing these injuries where I had chronic tendonitis in my knees, and that bothered me for 4 years. And I went to our family doctor, and I took drugs, and like a lot of people would do. And my knees got better until my drugs ran out, and then I had to go back and get more drugs. And so I spent a lot of my high school years just kind of figuring out how to heal myself. And it wasn't until I was in my first year playing college basketball that I was introduced to chiropractic. And when I went under chiropractic care, it really changed my whole health, my concentration. I had exercise-induced asthma. Even my concentration went up with basketball, so my free throw shooting percentage went up. And it got me pretty excited about something else besides basketball, because as an 18-year-old, I was a one-track mind guy where all I wanted to do was play basketball. And actually, the only reason I went to this college was to play basketball. And I took what's called recreation administration because it looked like one of the easiest programs in the school, so that it wouldn't interfere with my basketball. So I was kind of doing the opposite that what most people would do is they don't want their school to interfere with they don't want their sports to interfere with their school, but I did the opposite. And after 1 year under care, I totally switched into science, became a chiropractor 7 years later. And on that note, I did a lot of personal development. And that's where I kind of came around this underdog thing, where I seem to always be sabotaging my success. So kind of the first step for me is getting myself over this and being okay with success, not being so used to being an underdog. And then once I was in practice, I was finding that, a lot of my patients that weren't getting better as quick as they could were seeming to living their life out of obligation and always stressed out doing stuff for other people. And they weren't spending enough time doing stuff for themselves. And I kind of coined this term, the underdog curse, because it seemed like people were addicted to being an underdog. And I tried to actually write this book to kind of come up with some steps on how someone can actually overcome it. I had a really good friend of mine who was a patient of mine who developed ALS, and he passed away 2 years ago. And going through the whole process of trying to, first of all, help him get better, and then second of all, realizing what he had, and then helping him basically die, like doing a lot of the last things with him, like skating and skiing, and seeing him go through that whole purpose or that whole process of kind of doing the last things, really inspired me to not wait, because I've always wanted to write a book. And I think a lot of people out there have wanted to write a book. But when you see one of your best friends slowly die of a horrible disease like ALS, it kind of, it says, let's do it now. Let's not keep waiting, because if we wait, who knows what's going to happen. So I think those were some of the big triggers on why I initially wanted to write this book, and I actually did it.
I think he'd be quite proud, and it's quite a tribute to his inspiration that you've done this book as well.
Yeah, I think he would too. He's I think of him often, and I know he'd be proud of it.
Absolutely. So in the first part of your book, you're kind of introducing what the Underdog Curse is and what that means. I'm just going to read one little piece because I thought this kind of sums up, I think, where a lot of people find themselves. In the beginning, I liked being the underdog. It came with opportunity, support, and no expectations. It was easy to make excuses and easier to fail because the stakes are so low. So that pretty much sums up where a lot of people tend to be when we look at, well, why didn't you do what you want to do, or why didn't you start that project or start that book? It's easier to have no expectations. So does that sum up the Underdog Curse, or is there more that we can add to that?
Yeah, well, I kind of always say there's three types of underdogs, and so the goal is to kind of pick which one would be more effective. And so the first, it's kind of on a spectrum. So what I was more like was on the far side to the right. So I like to think of a bell curve. And on the left side of the bell curve, I call it addicted to being an underdog. And so in this case, like for example, if I was playing basketball, if I wasn't the best person on the team, I could always strive to improve, but at the end of the day, there wasn't really that much pressure on me to succeed because I wasn't one of the best players, so the pressure wasn't on my shoulders. In the book, I described when I went to college, I was one of the better players, and a lot of the pressure went on me, and then I just couldn't handle that. So that was where I really noticed, when I'm looking back on my life, of where I couldn't handle not being the underdog. On the other end of the spectrum, I call it underdog adverse. So these are some people, and people out there might know these people, who absolutely refuse to be an underdog. So they're on the end of the spectrum, where they actually won't try anything new because they want everybody to think they got all their stuff together. And so they're kind of like the overdog, I call it. So they're acting like everything's perfect, they're good at everything, and they won't try anything new because they refuse to ever be an underdog. And what I suggest in the book is for us to try to be an adaptable underdog. And an adaptable underdog can do both. So they can try new things, have new experiences in life, even though they're not very good at it. But if they become really successful or good at something, they also are okay with that as well, so they don't self-sabotage themselves. So it's kind of like flexing back and forth. And if you're an adaptable underdog, it kind of puts you in the prime area to have maximum growth in your life.
Well, that makes a lot of sense. So when you've looked at the Underdog Curse, it obviously has an impact on people's lives. So one of the things that we focus on with Beyond Your Wildest Genes is health. So maybe We'll start there. How does that Underdog Curse show up in health?
Well, there's kind of two main ways that I see. One of them, and you'll probably see this as well as you're a chiropractor and see a lot of patients as well, a lot of people are so busy looking after other people or worried about what other people are thinking that they don't have enough time to do the things they need to do to maintain their health. And if you go through years and years and years of always caretaking other people, but not actually doing stuff that really inspires you, that starts to trigger your stress response. And if someone's chronically firing their stress response because they're not really doing things that inspire them, that is going to just kind of put their health in a negative downward spiral. Have you noticed that with your patients?
Absolutely. I think that that's a pretty common beginning stage, I think, for a lot of people to actually end up in the cancer spectrum.
Yes, 100%, because they're just so worried, and there's so much other stuff to do. I don't have time to exercise, or I don't have time to meditate, or I suggest they get more sleep, and they're like, I get this with young parents a lot, which is pretty funny because I'll say, "Oh, you should go to bed early tonight," and they're like, "Are you kidding me? You don't have kids. You don't know what it's like." So, so everybody has those excuses, but I find that that is one of the key things is that people, they're so used, they almost get addicted to just kind of putting out fires or looking after people around them that they just don't spend enough time to go, what do I need to kind of build my body and my health?
Well, and that kind of martyrdom, especially when it leads to resentment, that has an impact on relationships. So the
Huge.
Underdog Curse obviously is a relationship damager.
Yes, 100%. Well, and again, if you think how the Underdog Curse kind of portrays in relationships is that, an underdog always wants to get the support. So they're always going to be trying to make sure that whatever happens, they're going to get the support. So when an underdog is trying to communicate with someone, they're going to almost try to make them feel sorry for them before, so that whenever they tell them what they would like, they won't fight them or won't argue with them. So I talk about in the book how when I was really in the Underdog Curse in relationships, where I tried to get everybody to get along and have everybody support me and not have any battles or conflict, it's quite exhausting because you have to come up with all these stories and it's just, trying to predict what people are going to respond to you with is exhausting. And that will create stress too, which also affects your health.
Absolutely. And it makes it really hard, perhaps for some underdogs, to even express what it is that they want or need from a relationship.
Oh, huge. And actually, it's funny because I've often asked this with my patients, and I say, at the end of the day, do you really know what you'd want or what you'd love? And they're like, no. And I'm like, well, I think it's because your what do I love muscle has atrophied because they're so used to worrying about everybody else. They haven't even asked themselves the question, what would I really want? And so because you haven't asked the question, they have no clue. And they're kind of in that position that even if they were in an environment where they could do what they'd want, they don't even know what they want.
Yeah, it's hard to find your way there when you're not quite sure where you're going.
100%.
Absolutely. So, and that really carries over then into people's business or financial life as well. For those people who are either working or self-employed or looking for that fulfilling place in business, the Underdog Curse is obviously takes away some of that perceived risk of, well, maybe I won't succeed or it's okay if I can't quite hit my targets, but it's also crippling.
Yes. Well, and I noticed this in my practice when I was first building my business. When I wasn't doing very good, people would feel sorry for you and they would support you and say, oh yeah, that's, they kind of motivate you and help you along the way. And then if you're addicted to being an underdog, that's perfect. But when you do get success, if you're really successful in whatever business endeavor you're doing, you don't get too many people that feel sorry for you and support you at that stage. And if you're constantly used to looking for someone to support you from the outside and you start to get financial success, you're kind of in a conundrum because you're like, oh no, now I'm not getting support from people. So maybe what I should do is subconsciously, of course, I didn't do this consciously, but subconsciously I will tank my business or sabotage my success so that people will come back and support me again.
Absolutely. And, a lot of people, I think, carry a bit of that angst around success that, who am I to think that I'm this? Or, I don't want to look flashy or I don't want to make someone else feel bad. But really what they're doing is giving themselves an out. Right.
Which is funny because in the short term, the out feels better, but we always do, we talk about the deathbed test is that if you're 80, 90 years old on your deathbed, will you wish that you did something different? Because success, when you have success, especially if you have financial success, you can do a lot of great things as far as giving back to the community and having contribution to society. And if you always keep sabotaging your success in the short term just to get that out, I think it really robs you for some of that fulfillment later on in life, trying to give back to, your community or your profession or the world. And I think a lot of times we don't think about that because we're looking for the short-term benefit and not kind of delaying that gratification to down the road.
Well, and the stress of carrying this underdog curse and this persona around with you has some physiological implications. I mean, I know your interest, like mine as a chiropractor, is in the neurologies. What is that doing to the brain, to the nervous system, to how the body functions? And there's a significant toll that takes.
Yes. Yeah, and we call that sympathetic dominance. So we always talk about your nervous system, which basically controls your whole body, can usually be in one of two states. It can be in a fight or flight state, which is a sympathetic state, which is great if you're getting chased by a grizzly bear. But the other state is more a parasympathetic state. And the nickname for that is rest and repair or rest and digest. And most of the time, our target is trying to be more about 80% parasympathetic. And I always tell my patients, I laugh, I said, so 80% of the time we should be pretty chill, and 20% of the time we should be freaked out, and or have to be in that sympathetic response. But the problem is there's a new term called sympathetic dominance, which is getting more and more researched right now. And we're finding out that when someone's in a state of sympathetic dominance and their body is in that fight or flight stage constantly, when your body's not designed to do that, that can almost be the cause of just about all the chronic degenerative diseases that we know nowadays. And the problem with the sympathetic dominance is it's not going to kill you in one day or 1 week, but it's such a slow, insidious process that it just slowly degrades your health over time, that it just sneaks up on people. And that's why in our circles, we always say stress is like the silent killer, because it just stays in the background and just chips away at your health until all of a sudden one day you're like, what happened? You either have a heart attack or get cancer or some other kind of degenerative disease happens.
Well, and this may happen in your practice, but I start to see it in that sort of mid-range of that spectrum where people are coming in, well, my doctor says I have a thyroid problem, or my naturopath says my adrenals are low, or they've got some sort of chemical manifestation of this exhaustion of their body, because you can't run from lions 24/7.
Right. Nope, that's exhausting.
You've got to stop and rest at some point. And if your body gets stuck in that state, you just don't have the opportunity to reset that. And of course, as chiropractors, we can come in and help reset that, but people have to change to really create the environment where that will have lasting results. They have to change the way they're thinking about health and the way they're thinking about the underdog curse if they're not satisfied with the life that they have.
Oh, 100%. Because again, it's just like I tease people. I said, if you come in and you've bruised your thumb with a hammer, and then every day you keep hitting it with a hammer, it's kind of hard to heal.
Exactly.
So that's that thing is and again, this is one of the reasons I'm really enjoying this. This book just came out basically about a month or two ago, and I'm really enjoying it with my patients, because once they read it, it just brings out some really cool conversations. And a lot of people are saying, yeah, I think part of my problem is that I'm stagnant in my life. And I think that sometimes symptoms of your body are actually kind of telling us that maybe we're not living our purpose, or maybe we're so much caretaking others, we're not doing what truly inspires us.
Absolutely. And I think we see it pervasive in society in anxiety. There is such a massive diagnosis of various anxiety type disorders. I'm a parent of teenagers. I can tell you, teenager that has got to be, it's the new ADHD. Like every second teenager is diagnosed with anxiety.
Right.
So there is an opportunity here for resetting that bar for some of our kids, not just for ourselves.
100%. Well, I think I see it all the time. And again, as far as the underdog goes, a lot of times the underdog is, as we're talking about, we're comparing it to others, right? So there's the external underdog, which would be like someone who's in an external environment. It could be like, you'll see this sometimes in football where, someone grows up in the slums or in the projects, and then they break out of the projects and then become a pro sports player. So that's kind of an external underdog. And once you break out of the projects, then you've changed your environment. So it's a little bit easier not to be an underdog. But the hardest part is the internal underdog, because you'll see a lot of people where you look at them externally and you're like, there's no way you should feel not worthy to be where you are in your life. You're good looking, you're in a good environment, you have a successful job, but each person are responsible for dealing with what's going on in their brain. And so that's the thing, is that internally, if we're constantly comparing ourselves to others, it will create anxiety, because everybody, and you know this too, everybody has a different set of values, everybody has a different purpose. And so the only way you should be comparing yourself is to what you would ideally want, because everybody's different and everybody wants something different.
Absolutely. So one of the things that you talk about in the book is crushing the curse, is some, really practical things that people can do to, after they've identified maybe where on the spectrum of that underdog scenario they may sit, how they can turn it around.
Yeah, and there's 9 steps in the book, but I'll just kind of go over 4 just to summarize them, so it's a little bit easier to kind of digest. But the first one is your health. Like, most of the time when people have been in the underdog curse for a long time, their health has been beaten down. And I don't know about you, but I know anytime that I've been extremely stressed, or there's been a time in my life where I went through a huge amount of stress and burnt my adrenal glands out, it's really hard to do mindset work when your body is exhausted and tapped. And so the number one thing I always suggest in the book is to really get stronger, as far as, starting your exercise, eating better, making sure you're under chiropractic care, make sure that posture's good, getting enough sleep. So there's some tips that we really want to do to start building our health. Once we built our health and start to get our health better, then it's about getting clear in your mind of what you really would like to do. And this is a hard part. A lot of people need to spend some more time by themselves. Before I even went through all my personal development, I could not stand being by myself. Like, I had to be around people all the time, because I would just go nuts if I was just by myself. And now that I've kind of got more clear on what my purpose is, I actually enjoy being by myself, because then I can do planning. I can, double check with myself if I'm on track. Am I still doing things that are high on my values? Is my purpose still correct? So there's a couple things in the book that talk about how to find out your values, how to see how you're meeting your needs, get our brain kind of on the right track, so we can kind of head our life in the direction that we want. And then the third thing that we can do is clean up our environment. So, the one part of our environment is our friends. And I do have a chapter about different bonds. Like, as we have relationships with people in our life, they have a big influence on us. And there's a thing called a power bond in the book. And a power bond is a person that you can find who will take enough time to ask you questions and find out what you truly want, and then hold you accountable to what you truly want. What we want to be careful of is to avoid the other 3 bonds, especially if we're going through a time that we want to create change. One is a guilt bond. So we want to be careful about people who try to get us to do what they want through using guilt. The other one is a control bond. And those ones are quite obvious. They just control people. So if you have someone that you spend a lot of time with that controls you, you're obviously not going to be living your purpose, because you're basically doing what they want. And then the last one, which is a little bit more sneaky, is I call it the comfort bond. I call it the granny bond. So it'd be like going to your grandma's place, where, I always laugh. My grandma, anytime I felt bad, I'd always go to my grandma's house, and we'd eat peanut butter sandwiches and just watch TV. And my grandma would love to have done that forever. It's nice to go to a comfort bond for a bit to kind of get recharged. But if you always surround yourself with comfort bonds, you don't really move anywhere. So that'd be like friends too, that don't want you to change, because that makes them feel bad about changing themselves as well. So I think it's really important to find power bonds in your environment. Clean up your environment. Cluttered mess, cluttered office, cluttered house. We've just been cleansing our house, and holy cow, once you clean your house, clean your environment, clean your even your closet, it just helps to clear up more energy, so that you can kind of work towards covering this underdog curse. And the last step I call it creating a fire drill. And one thing we have to realize is that no matter how focused we are or how clear our purpose is, things are going to go wrong. And we need to be able to adapt to those. So in the chapter, I call it closing the refractory period, to make sure that after we have something go wrong, it doesn't go on for weeks or months before we get back on track again. And when we were all kids, I'm sure everyone can remember, when we'd be in school, we'd practice the fire drill. And the reason they practice the fire drill is that when you're calm, when you're relaxed, you actually plan what to do in case there's an emergency. And so the reason we do that is so then if there is an emergency and things are crazy, we already kind of automatically know what to do. And so with some of my clients that I've been working with coaching, it's funny because I always say, like, when things go wrong, is there certain habits or patterns or routines that we can kind of default to that are going to help us get on track? Like, instead of catastrophizing or amplifying everything that went wrong or thinking, kind of taking it to the nth degree, maybe we go for a walk or we exercise or we journal or we meditate or we do something that's more proactive. And I think if we can get that, that fire drill down, that helps us to get back on track, because always there's going to be stuff that goes wrong. We just don't want that to kind of keep going on forever.
Do you think that with those underdog pathways that we've kind of built up, perhaps by behaving in that way or thinking in that way for perhaps years or decades, there's that temptation to catastrophize and quit and, oh, well, I tried, I did my best, and, I'm just going to go back to this comfortable underdog.
Yes. Well, and we've all heard this. They're called softeners, right?
Right.
One of my favorite stories, and I got it in the book, is she's a really good friend of ours, and she went through a divorce, and she was at a really low time of her life, and me and my wife, Brandy, were trying to help her out and, kind of get her inspired to kind of get to the next stage of her life. And when she was really frustrated one time, she said, well, it could always be worse. I could be on 118th Avenue, and in our town, that's a seedy neighborhood, selling my body for money. And so we were like, so that is your alternative? Like, that's crazy. Like, that's a total example of a softener. When things aren't going good, that softener is actually an excuse to stay, just to keep things the status quo, like just to keep it the way it is. It's not really inspiring to take it to the next level. So I always say we want to be grateful, like we want to be grateful of where we're at, but we also don't want to use softeners, which gratitude, I always say, is kind of grateful for the moment, but open for the future. And a softener is just making an excuse why it's okay just to stay the exact same.
Right. We call that the jacuzzi experience.
Yeah.
It's really feels good while you're in it, but you're not really going anywhere.
No.
So,
it's funny.
It's all good. So at the end of the book, what is your end goal for readers when they read the book? What would make you feel like you've really accomplished your purpose and passion in writing this book if people got to the end and said, okay, this is something I've learned, or this is something I can take away?
Well, and I think it's kind of what I've got from writing the book. And when I heard the story of how Napoleon Hill wrote Think and Grow Rich, he actually wrote that for himself. And that was kind of another reason why I wanted to write the book, was that if I could take all the stuff I've done, just like you guys, years and years of personal development, and then take those mentors that I've had, filter them through my life experiences, and actually get them down into a book, then that helps me to kind of achieve my goals. And so what I've discovered after doing a lot of this work is, for one, is to quiet my brain. That's like one of the number one things. Before I did all this personal development, my brain was just like a hyperactive, crazy, like short-circuited computer where it was just like running programs over and over again, which was exhausting. And I think to be able to get clear on my goals, clear on my vision, clear on my values and my purpose, and then kind of sever away all the other distractions, it helps to quiet my brain, which gets me in that parasympathetic zone, which is awesome. Like, it's just nice to have a quiet brain. And I think the second thing is to live a life that you are truly proud of, or that I am truly proud of. And when you are living in the underdog curse, is someone else proud of you? Which means, are you doing this for your parents? Are you doing this for your spouse? Are you doing this for your friends? Are you doing this for your kids? And for one thing, it's nice for someone else to be proud of you. But I think the ideal goal is to get to the end of your life and actually have you proud of you. And the only way for you to be proud of you is to get clear on what you'd really like to do, what your contributions to the world would be, and do those. And I think if someone can finish this book and do those two things, be able to quiet their brain, get clear on what they want, and then take some action and be proud of what they've done, I think that I'll have succeeded in writing it.
Fantastic. So in the show notes, we're going to include a link for purchasing the book. How can listeners get the book? Obviously online.
Yeah, it's available on Amazon.
Okay.
In Canada, Amazon.ca, Amazon.com, and it's available in the softcover and in the Kindle version. And if anyone wants to go to my website too, it's theunderdogcurse.com. I'll have a newsletter sign up where I'll have I have an email that's just starting here right away called the Weekly Crush the Curse. So I'll just kind of keep giving different tips on different examples of where the underdog curse might kind of arise in your life, and some tips on how to decrease that.
Sounds good. Now, for everybody driving, we will include those in the show notes. So no crashing, no trying to text yourself while you're driving. We'll take care of all that. We'll put those in the show notes so you'll get them. Any final thoughts you want to leave with our listeners? As you know, Beyond Your Wildest Genes, we share a similar goal for people in that, they're not limited by who they believe they've inherited, but that they have an opportunity to create who they want to be and their better health, their better mental, physical, and chemical and emotional states based on how they live their life. So anything that you want to leave them behind as a little end note?
Yeah, I think, once I discovered that by the time you're 6 or 7, your hardwire, so to speak, has been programmed by your whole environment. And whether that's been your friends, your parents, your, teachers, all those kind of things. If we don't go back in and kind of analyze our hardwire system, we're going to live our life off default. And when we really want to live an impactful life, which I think that's going to help with your health and all that as well, we almost got to kind of dive in and figure out what makes us tick. And I think if we find out what makes us tick, then we feel like we have more involvement, and it helps to decrease our stress. If we feel like we're just a victim of our life or our environment or our genes, for example, we're going to be living our life a lot differently than if we feel like we have some kind of input or say. So I think, you guys say this all the time on all your podcasts, but you have huge control over your life. We just need to know the tools that will help us to take that control. And once you take that control, it makes life way more enjoyable. And I hope, and my wish for all the listeners is that they can find how to take that control as well.
Absolutely. Well, thank you for joining us, Dr. Don. We appreciate your time and your impact in sharing this life-changing information and action steps with our wonderful tribe of listeners. And thanks, everyone, for listening this week. If you've heard something you like, please share it with others. Beyond Your Wildest Genes podcast is free and online in iTunes, Podomatic, and many other favorite online players. If you want more from us, please subscribe to our weekly newsletter at www.centerforepigeneticexpression.com. And you can also go there to download transcripts, including a transcript of today's episode. So we are looking forward to sharing more great health and well-being experts with you each week. And now with our nearly 200,000 listeners all around the world. So until next time, our wish for you is that you live well.